Good morning, I'm Dave Christie with your LaRouche Organization Daily Update for Friday, December 26th. I want to encourage you all to sign up for today's International Peace Coalition. It will be broadcast live at 11, and you can participate if you sign up for the Zoom link, which you can find on the schillerinstitute.com site. The title of today's proceedings is Reason, Immorality, and the Refusal to be Small. And it will feature Rachel Clark. She is an interpreter, consultant, and international coordinator between Japan and the United States. So that will be important given the recent moves that Japan has signaled in terms of intention potentially to gain nuclear weapons and sort of belligerence towards Taiwan. So obviously her insights will be important on that in that theater. And she will be joined, Rachel Clark will be joined by Larry Johnson, who is a former CIA analyst and, if not one of the founding members, one of the leading members of the Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity. Very clear voices as former intelligence officers who have opposed the endless war program. So it's important that all of us be involved in the International Peace Coalition proceedings, whether watching it live or catching the broadcast later. But this is essential moving into the new year, that we hit the ground running in terms of the required mobilization, particularly as we enter the 250th year of the 250th anniversary of our Declaration of Independence. Now, I just want to state that all of the global confrontations that we see, that we have to remind ourselves that the backdrop is the collapse of the transatlantic financial system. It is hopelessly gone and bankrupt and cannot be revived in its present form. That was effectively stated by Lyndon LaRouche on the eve of the 2008 financial crisis, when in 2007 he stated that there is no possibility of a non-collapse. In other words, this system was gone and could not be saved in its existing form. And in the ensuing years, he developed his concept entitled that he eventually referred to as his 4 laws, which included number 1, Glass-Steagall. That would effectively destroy the so-called universal banking model that was brought in after the repeal of Glass-Steagall in 1999, where the speculative side of the financial world, particularly those of the investment banks and the insurance operations, would be hived off from their commercial bank umbrella that we see under the universal banking model. And of course, having them be all these functions of investment banking, insurance, and under the umbrella of the commercial banks means that they're also able to, FDIC has them as for a backstop. The Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation will backstop, supposedly, the assets of the commercial banks, which of course they have nowhere near the funds required to deal with the quadrillions of dollars of speculative financial assets claimed on these books. Now, Glass-Steagall would be followed up by the second of LaRouche's 4 laws, which is a national credit policy in line with Alexander Hamilton, and as well the establishment of a national bank, again in line with Hamilton's designs and thinkings, which would be fundamentally not only different, but would eliminate the Federal Reserve System as it stands right now as a kind of cartel, if you will, of the private banks behind it. But the key to these banking reforms was the other parts of LaRouche's 4 laws, which was a new economic platform, different than just simply infrastructure, but a platform of economic development based on the frontiers of science. And he very explicitly stated that we had to have a new fusion platform for all, and have that integrated into all layers of the economy, as well as the related space program. But that this would accomplish and would be backed up, the credit policy and the banking structures would be backed up through a fusion program with the actual future growth accomplished through increasing the potential relative population density. That was LaRouche's metric for what a real economy would function under. Now, just on the note of fusion, I just want to cite something that you can read further in today's EIR Daily Alert, which is that the Lawrence Livermore Laboratories National Ignition Facility is teaming up with a German organization. Now, just to remind you, the Lawrence Livermore National Ignition Facility is the world's only fusion experimental facility to have ignited a burning fusion plasma. It's done that multiple times, but it's now entered into a partnership with the Fraunhofer Institute for Laser Technology in Aachen, Germany. And so this would obviously go a long way towards the development of this fusion economy, the required fusion development, which is well underway in China as well as Russia, and would be one of the key areas of collaboration with these nations as well. So that's useful to note that this partnership is moving forward. Now, I just want to cite something on the broader, as part of the broader matter of economic development and what is required. We had what was just raised by Kirill Dmitriev, that is the head of Dmitriev is the head of the Russian Direct Investment Fund, their sovereign wealth fund, effectively, and as well as obviously the negotiator with Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner on matters on U.S.-Russia relations, although obviously the issue of Ukraine is a significant part of that. But recall that Kirill Dmitriev had proposed back in October the idea of the Bering Strait connection between Russia and the United States, which, in addition to the rail and road transport links, would include oil and gas pipelines and energy transmission in general. And when he posed this, it's significant that this was done in part in the context of the release of documents by the Russian government in terms of their files on the assassination of John F. Kennedy. Now, in that, there was a document, very surprising maybe not surprising that it existed, but it was of interest, which was a hand-drawn map of the Bering Strait connection, and along it was entitled the Kennedy-Khrushchev World Peace Bridge. So, in other words, this was on the table during Kennedy's time and before his untimely death and assassination by the powers that be. Now, in this context, and there's an article that is published in the Wall Street Journal yesterday entitled, "Trump's Inner Circle Sees Russia as an El Dorado for Business, but Pitfalls Abound." Now, the article itself doesn't mention necessarily what is Dmitriev is now calling the Putin-Trump tunnel. I don't believe the article references it specifically, but it says, for Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, President Trump's billionaire envoys working on a deal to end the Ukraine war, Russia is a land of vast natural resources and rich business opportunities. Welcoming it back into the world economy will make money for American investors and stabilize Moscow's relationships with Ukraine and Europe, according to the public comments and people familiar with their thinking. Anyway, it goes on to discuss this and, of course, the pitfalls that exist. And the relevance of this article and citing it in here is clearly this is a major concern for the Wall Street and City of London crowd, that any a reestablishment of relations between the United States and Russia would be around economic development, which, as we know, would be the death knell of British geopolitics, to have the United States and Russia collaborating in this way, particularly in Arctic development and unlocking the vast resources that are in this region of the world. But as we know, and as LaRouche, as a major proponent of the Bering Strait connection, he always intended that this was simply one feature of the integration towards his idea of a world land bridge, which is effectively what China is doing with the Belt and Road Initiative throughout Central Asia and expanding these development corridors into Africa, that through the world land bridge concept and across the Bering Strait, this could be done not only in North America with the United States and its development of similar development corridors along major, transportation routes and so forth, and as well with Canada in this case, but that this could be extended to our neighbors in the South. Certainly a far better, better than blowing up drug boats and so on. Eliminate the cartels by bringing in real economic development and, have the capability to go from the Tierra del Fuego down over up through the Bering Strait and all the way down to South Africa. That's the world that could be. But that would eliminate the mantra of NATO to keep the U.S. in, Russia out, and Germany down. Certainly Germany is down, but with this kind of collaborative approach and a Germany restoring its outlook to that of Friedrich List and others proponents of the American system. Recall that List and Henry Carey and others were promoting the idea of a world land bridge even back in the 1800s, and were aware of the idea of connecting the world through the Bering Strait, even at that time, perhaps a bridge at that time, but this was, Lincoln had this as a concept then. But I think, in all of these, this reflects the idea that is a reflection of the fact that ideas change the course of human history. And that will be taken up today in the International Peace Coalition, which in the write-up on the event, it starts with, when sanctions are imposed without trial, bank accounts closed without explanation, and political speech treated as a public danger, the issue is no longer this or that policy dispute. It is whether reason itself will be allowed to function. Ideas which seem to have no physical force yet can move mountains and empires and create entirely new fields of science, because the human mind is capable of discovering principles that govern the universe. That coherence between creative thought and the reality of our developing universe is the source of power, is the true source of power. And it goes on, but it does make the point in the write-up for today's International Peace Coalition that such measures, in terms of the censorship and so on, are not strength, they are admissions of intellectual bankruptcy. And that is what we are seeing from NATO land. Now, I just want to cite in this that Kaja Kallas, the head of the foreign policy chief, if you will, of the European Union, she came out with a statement saying that the decision by the State Department, which imposed sanctions on travel restrictions, not necessarily financial sanctions yet, amongst those in the European crowd that were pushing for the censorship regime. She says that the decision by the U.S. to impose travel restrictions on European citizens and officials is unacceptable and an attempt to challenge our sovereignty. Now, of course, it should be recalled that Kaja Kallas back in August was the one issuing stop it. She called for stop issuing tourist visas to Russia, as, time to end tourism and so forth. But she was obviously condemning what occurred with Thierry Breton, among others. She specifically cited that in this statement. But it should just be recalled that Thierry Breton was the one calling out Elon Musk for daring to interview Donald Trump back in 2024. So, this is the kind of what is the case with these guys, that the idea of imposing the Digital Services Act, which was threatened at that time to protect EU citizens from serious harm, was the harm that would be imposed by hearing from a presidential candidate. So you get the point. But this is in light of the sanctions that we have seen against Jacques Beau, the former Swiss intelligence expert. There's others as well. In Slovenia, a judge was sanctioned as well as the UN Special Rapporteur for Palestine, Francesca Albanese. We have the closing of accounts in Germany, of bank accounts for the German Communist Party. Their party's accounts will be closed on December 31st. Journalists have had their accounts closed as well. Last March, Berliner Sparkasse froze the account of a Jewish anti-Zionist group named the Jewish Voice for Just Peace in the Middle East. And it goes on like that. But this is the point, is that this is an act of desperation and a reflection that the powers that be fear the power of ideas. As well, Lithuania has approved the legislation that expands the power of its intelligence services, basically allowing agents to detain and search suspected individuals as well as conduct surveillance without a court order. So you see where this goes. And so I think this comes back to our point that it is the power of ideas that change human history, and this is what they are afraid of. But it is up to us to further organize and put forward the ideas that will move humanity into a new direction. That is what LaRouche's 4 laws were designed to do. That is what Helga Zepp-LaRouche's 10 principles are, to facilitate that discussion, to bring the world together around a new spirit of peace through development. And that is what will be taken up in the International Peace Coalition. I encourage you to join that discussion and stay tuned to the LaRouche organization.